To steal the billionaire's fortune, Mistress conspire to push his pregnant wife down the stairs. A lust for power, a thirst for wealth, a betrayal that shatters the sanctity of family. This explosive saga follows billionaire Jonathan Ashford, whose legacy is threatened not by the fluctuations of the stock market, but by the people he trusts most, his own sister and his secret mistress. Together, they weave a twisted conspiracy to eliminate Jonathan's pregnant wife, Sophia, in a vicious ploy to secure the Ashford empire for themselves. In a single horrifying moment, one fateful pushed down a grand marble staircase, a web of deceit begins to unravel. Will Sophia's fall topple the entire Ashford legacy, or can justice prevail? The Ashford family name was synonymous with affluence, influence, and impeccable prestige. Their wealth spanned generations, starting with the first Ashford shipping venture in the mid-1800s. Since then, the Ashfords had branched into real estate, venture capital, and an ever-expanding portfolio of global holdings. At the helm of the modern Ashford empire stood Jonathan Ashford, a charming and astute billionaire who had expanded his inheritance exponentially. With every deal he closed, every partnership he forged, his personal star ascended. Jonathan's wife, Sophia Delgado Ashford, was a philanthropic force known for her humanitarian efforts. She had once been a rising architect, recognized by the American Institute of Architects, until Jonathan swept her off her feet. The two married in a lavish ceremony at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York, with tabloids broadcasting the event as if it were a royal wedding. Sophia put many of her architectural ambitions on hold to support her husband's business dealings and to plan for a family, both of which she did wholeheartedly. Behind the surface glitz, however, dark undertones existed. Jonathan's younger sister, Victoria Ashford, carried a quiet resentment. She believed that, as an Ashford by blood rather than by marriage, she deserved a larger share of the family legacy. Growing up, Victoria had always played second fiddle to her older brother. Even as a child, Jonathan was lauded for his intelligence, ambition, and leadership qualities, while Victoria was indulged merely as the pampered princess. As an adult, she gravitated toward the fringe of high society, attending galas more for social climbing than genuine philanthropy. Jonathan's carefully guarded secret was Cassandra Moore, his long-term mistress. He'd met Cassandra 5 years prior at a private investor summit in Monaco. At first, she was just another striking woman in a glittering gown, her auburn hair tumbling over bare shoulders. But their momentary conversation sparkled with chemistry. Cassandra was an ambitious event planner who had an uncanny ability to connect with wealthy magnates, and Jonathan was no exception. Soon enough, they were entangled in an affair that Jonathan justified as harmless. He told himself it did not negate his love for Sophia. It was just an indulgence, an escape from the pressures of empire building. But Cassandra had grown more demanding. She coveted the Ashford name, fortune, and power. She was tired of being a secret, relegated to stolen weekends in private villas and exclusive resorts. Cassandra wanted legitimacy, a permanent seat at Jonathan's side, and she wasn't above orchestrating chaos to get it. Complicating matters further was Sophia's long-awaited pregnancy. After years of trying, Sophia was 3 months along and positively glowing. The family was delighted. The media raved about another heir to the Ashford dynasty. Yet in the shadows, envy festered. Victoria realized that with Sophia pregnant, the unborn child stood next in line to claim a significant share of the Ashford wealth, potentially diminishing her slice of the pie. Cassandra saw her own dreams of marrying Jonathan growing dimmer, believing that a baby would tether him more firmly to Sophia. Unspoken resentments and simmering desires coalesced. No one would have predicted the horrific plan that Victoria and Cassandra would eventually hatch. But in the relentless pursuit of wealth, some people will cross any boundary. Victoria Ashford was the first to notice the subtle shift in Jonathan's demeanour. Ever since Sophia's pregnancy announcement, Jonathan seemed more focused on family matters. At the weekly board meetings, he often found himself distracted by the thought of nursery colours and baby names. While the company continued to thrive, his personal sense of purpose had grown even more profound. He was about to become a father, an event that stirred him far more than any business deal could. For Victoria, this evolution was vexing. She had tried in her own ways to insert herself into Jonathan's life, hoping to leverage her status as the eccentric little sister to land influential roles within the Ashford empire. Yet Jonathan remained largely unimpressed by her business acumen. He had entrusted certain philanthropic committees to Victoria, but never the substantial responsibilities that translated to real power or robust financial control. She had to be content with a mere trickle of the vast Ashford fortune. That frustration boiled over one evening at a black tie charity gala. Victoria, draped in a designer gown, lingered by the bar, swirling a martini, when she overheard two businessmen discussing Sophia's pregnancy. Their hushed conversation implied that Jonathan was preparing a generational wealth trust for his unborn child, a trust so large it would eclipse nearly any single bequest to other family members. The men clinked glasses and moved on, leaving Victoria stewing. A few days later, she arranged a luncheon with an old friend, Rosalind Chambers, a private financial advisor known for her discretion. Over a hushed conversation in a hidden corner of a five-star restaurant, Victoria tested the waters. Rosalind, hypothetically, if a major heir or heiress to the Ashford fortune were to vanish, how complicated would it be to maneuver the estate? Rosalind, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, studied Victoria's face. Vanishing heirs. That's not a small hypothetical. The complexities depend on wills, trusts, and other legal documents. Why the sudden curiosity? Victoria waved her question away with a forced laugh. Just exploring family gossip. You know how it is with these old money dynasties. Everyone's always anticipating the next big shift. Rosalind didn't press further. But as Victoria left, she noticed a troubling gleam in her friend's eyes, hinting that this was no mere hypothetical. In the meantime, Cassandra Moore had grown impatient in her role as secret mistress. She still had access to Jonathan, but recently he'd become less available, citing the need to care for his pregnant wife. Cassandra's gifts were fewer, the clandestine meetings more sporadic. She felt overshadowed by Sophia and the future child. One evening, she confronted Jonathan in a luxury hotel suite where they occasionally met. Dressed in a silk robe, she vented her frustration. "You promised me a life by your side. Are you expecting me to wait forever while Sophia and that child take precedence?" Jonathan, exhausted from a day of negotiations, responded with exasperation. "Cass, I never promised marriage. I told you from the start, I have obligations. A child changes everything." Those words were like a punch to Cassandra's gut. She knew a child would bind Jonathan more tightly to Sophia, eroding any hope of making their relationship official. If only that pregnancy hadn't happened. She slammed the door behind her when she left, blinking back tears of fury. As chance would have it, fate soon aligned the paths of Victoria and Cassandra. Both women recognized a shared frustration with Sophia's pregnancy. It began with guarded, coded discussions, each one testing the other's intentions. Over time, they grew bold enough to speak openly. The unborn child was an obstacle. And so was Sophia. One sultry evening, in the lounge of a chic midtown hotel, they had a meeting that would set into motion events none could reverse. Over a bottle of expensive champagne, Victoria expressed her resentment of how the Ashford fortune would soon be funneled towards Sophia's baby, leaving her with scraps. Cassandra reciprocated with venomous complaints about the child, tying Jonathan permanently to his wife. And so, a whispered pact was formed, a horrifying plan to solve both their problems in one decisive move. Weeks passed, and the alliance between Victoria and Cassandra intensified. They met clandestinely, sharing details about Sophia's daily routine, potential vulnerabilities, and ways to stage an accident. Both women were cunning enough to recognize that a poorly executed scheme could ruin them. They needed to ensure that if anything suspicious happened, blame would fall elsewhere, or, better yet, nowhere at all. Sophia remained blissfully unaware of the danger. Eager about her pregnancy, she had devoted more time to philanthropic causes, especially those involving underprivileged mothers and children. The city's tabloids adored her, the philanthropic beauty, pregnant with the next Ashford heir. Jonathan's stock soared in the eyes of the press, painting him as a caring husband and soon-to-be father. It was a perfect story, so perfect that no one guessed a violent undercurrent was about to break the surface. Though the sisters-in-law rarely saw eye to eye, Sophia had tried to maintain cordial ties with Victoria. She invited Victoria to a small dinner party at the Ashford penthouse to celebrate the second trimester of her pregnancy, a milestone that doctors said was especially safe for both mother and child. Jonathan was out of town on business, but Sophia still wanted a quiet celebration with a few friends. She saw it as a chance to mend whatever hidden rifts might linger. Naively, she extended an olive branch. Victoria accepted the invite with feigned enthusiasm, then immediately informed Cassandra. "This is perfect," Victoria whispered over the phone. "A small gathering, fewer eyes. Let's see if an opportunity presents itself." On the night of the dinner, the Ashford penthouse was a vision of understated elegance. White roses in crystal vases adorned the dining table, candles flickered, and the city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Sophia, glowing and radiant in a loose-fitting designer gown, greeted Victoria at the door with a warm smile. "I'm so glad you could make it," she said. Victoria smiled politely, handing Sophia a small box. "A gift for you and the baby." Inside was a delicate silver rattle engraved with the initials AA for Ashford's heir, though the baby's gender and name had yet to be decided. Despite her dark intentions, Victoria had to keep up the facade. A few close friends attended as well, including Annika Patel, Sophia's confidant from her days in architecture school, and Elaine Carter, a socialite known for her impeccable hosting tips. Unbeknownst to everyone else, Cassandra Moore arrived late. She was not on the official guest list. Sophia would never have invited her personally, but Cassandra slyly convinced the doorman. She was a business associate of Jonathan Ashford, claiming she needed to drop off urgent documents. In the swirl of arrivals and casual chatter, she slipped into the penthouse unnoticed. Lurking in the corridor outside the main room, her heart pounded with adrenaline. The plan was not fully finalized. They weren't sure if tonight was the moment to strike, but Cassandra wanted to gather intel. Where were the security cameras? How many staff were around? Did Sophia ever walk by a set of stairs alone? Victoria, glancing around the room, spotted Cassandra. With a quick, subtle nod, she beckoned her mistress accomplice closer. In hushed tones near a corner alcove, they conferred. "Now?" Cassandra whispered. "Are we doing this now?" Victoria scanned the guests. Annika and Elaine were deep in conversation. Sophia was in the kitchen with the chef, sampling hors d'oeuvre. "Not yet," Victoria said quietly, "but watch her routine. If we spot an opening, we'll take it." They got their chance when Sophia excused herself to fetch some special herbal teas from an upper-level pantry. The Ashford penthouse, sprawling across 2 floors, had a grand circular staircase that connected the living areas below with private rooms above. As Sophia began her ascent, Cassandra and Victoria exchanged a charged look. This was a perfect scenario. If Sophia fell down that massive staircase, it could easily be chalked up to a tragic accident. Cassandra quietly moved into position at the foot of the stairs, pretending to admire the artwork. Victoria trailed a few steps behind Sophia, her pulse racing. Her hands trembled, but she swallowed her nerves, reminding herself of the goal: the unborn child must be eliminated. The baby threatened her share of the Ashford estate, and Cassandra had her own reasons to want Sophia out of the picture. But at the last moment, Annika Patel called up from the foyer. "Sophia, can I help you find something? You shouldn't strain yourself lifting boxes around." Her voice echoed, halting Victoria in her tracks. The plan was foiled, for now Annika bounded up the steps to accompany Sophia, and the pregnant wife welcomed her friend's assistance with a gracious smile. Victoria glided back down, trying to mask her disappointment. Cassandra, reading the situation, slipped out of the penthouse as quietly as she had arrived, leaving no trace of her presence. Their carefully orchestrated accident had to wait for another day. As the dinner party wound down, Sophia noticed Victoria's uncharacteristic tension. Victoria was usually aloof or indifferent at social gatherings, but tonight she seemed downright fidgety, her eyes constantly darting toward the staircase or the upstairs landing. Sophia chalked it up to a personal issue. She made a mental note to reach out to Victoria later in case her sister-in-law needed support or was dealing with some private dilemma. Yet Sophia also felt an odd chill, as if some presence had lingered around the penthouse that night, someone besides the invited guests. She couldn't quite put a finger on it, but glimpses of a figure, the faint impression of footsteps outside the dining area, stuck in her mind. When she asked the butler if anyone else had arrived, he looked perplexed. "No one that I'm aware of, Mrs. Ashford." The doorman mentioned a woman with documents, but he thought she left. It was enough to spark a tiny thread of unease. Sophia brushed it aside for the time being, focusing on the fact that the evening had concluded smoothly, with no mishaps to speak of. But a seed of suspicion had been planted, one that would quietly grow over the coming days. Meanwhile, Jonathan returned from his business trip the following day. He entered the penthouse with fresh flowers for Sophia, apologizing for missing the celebration. "I heard you had a small dinner? Sorry to have missed it," he said, kissing Sophia's forehead gently. "That's all right. Victoria was here. So were Annika and Elaine," she recounted, leaning into her husband's embrace. "It was lovely. Except, well, I think someone else came by. Uninvited. I'm not sure who, but I sensed it." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "Do you suspect anything was taken? Should I have security check the cameras?" Sophia paused, uncertain whether she was overreacting. "No, it's probably nothing. Maybe my imagination, or just staff passing by." She forced a small laugh. Blame it on pregnancy hormones. But Jonathan didn't laugh. He scrutinized her expression. "We can't be too careful. I'll have our security consultant, Matthias Carlson, review the footage, just to be safe." In the following days, Matthias quietly checked the building's surveillance for any unusual entries during the dinner party. Sure enough, he found a short clip of Cassandra Moore stepping inside the lobby, telling the doorman about urgent business. However, the footage above the penthouse floor was incomplete due to a camera malfunction, ironically or not. That camera had been offline for maintenance. The doorman confirmed letting Cassandra in, but reported she left soon after. It seemed innocuous, though curious. Jonathan, upon learning this, felt a pang of guilt. He knew exactly who Cassandra Moore was, and he immediately understood she must have come to see him. But why? on a night he was out of town. The mistress he'd been keeping at arm's length was now intruding on his personal life in a way that could endanger his marriage. Determined to prevent a scandal, Jonathan downplayed the matter to Matthias. "I know Miss Moore from a past business event," he explained, spinning a half-truth. "Probably just a confusion about meeting times. Let's drop it." The decision to drop it was a miscalculation, for it allowed Cassandra to remain free from scrutiny and gave her and Victoria time to refine their plan. Meanwhile, Sophia grew more uneasy. She sensed that Jonathan was hiding something, and his vague dismissal of the security footage only heightened her wariness. Thus, the seeds of suspicion began to bud. Sophia suspected something was off. Jonathan suspected Cassandra's intentions were more dangerous than he'd realized. And Cassandra and Victoria, in turn, suspected they'd have to strike soon before mounting vigilance could derail their scheme entirely. Cassandra did not sit idle. She recognized that her appearance at the Ashford penthouse, even if fleeting, risked raising suspicion. Knowing Jonathan, he would connect the dots. And if he sensed any malicious plot, he might turn on her. So she ramped up her manipulative charm, texting Jonathan with carefully curated messages, apologies layered with enticement. "I'm sorry about the other night. I thought you were home. I had crucial documents. Let me make it up to you sometime." Jonathan's responses were tepid at best. He was growing increasingly concerned about her erratic behavior, especially with Sophia's pregnancy. Cassandra read the distance in his replies and felt panic rise. It was becoming clear that unless she took drastic action, Jonathan might sever ties entirely. On the other side, Victoria felt cornered by her own frustrations. She had used her position in the Ashford philanthropic committees to glean information about the estate's financial reorganizations. Indeed, Jonathan was restructuring assets to include a grand trust for his child. Victoria's potential inheritance would be comparatively smaller unless something changed. Spurred by desperation, Victoria arranged another secret rendezvous with Cassandra. They convened in a discreet booth at an upscale lounge, concealed by velvet curtains and the low hum of background jazz. After ordering a cocktail, Victoria leaned forward, her voice quivering with intensity. "We nearly had our moment at the penthouse stairs, but that meddling friend, Annika, intervened. We can't rely on luck next time." Cassandra folded her arms across her chest, nodding. "We need a situation where we can control the environment. Another staircase, maybe, or something even more certain, an accidental car crash, perhaps." Victoria hesitated, eyes flicking around to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "A car accident might leave too many traces. We want something that looks like a domestic mishap." That huge staircase at the Ashford family estate in upstate New York. You remember the old manor? My father had it built with a sweeping, curved staircase, dangerously steep. Sophia's never been comfortable there. She's visited only a few times. Cassandra nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting. Can you orchestrate a visit there? Jonathan's been meaning to do a weekend getaway before the baby arrives. I can hint at wanting a small family gathering, just us, maybe a few staff. If we can isolate Sophia near those stairs." The conversation carried on, each detail more chilling than the last. They discussed potential times, carefully weighing Jonathan's schedule. A critical point emerged. They needed to ensure Jonathan's absence, or at least his distraction, during the actual event. After all, he might suspect foul play if he witnessed Sophia's accident up close. They parted with a renewed sense of purpose and a timeline forming. Time was pressing. Sophia's pregnancy was now 4 months along, and each passing week made their plan riskier. If they waited too long, the baby might be born a living heir, complicating inheritance lines further. They resolved to act soon, but even as they meticulously plotted, doubt and guilt gnawed at them. Victoria found herself waking in the dead of night, heart pounding, imagining her parents' disapproving faces from beyond the grave. Cassandra sometimes paused during her daily routine, catching her reflection in a mirror and wondering how she had spiraled to this point, scheming to harm a woman who had done nothing to her except exist as an obstacle. Yet, the lust for wealth and status overshadowed their fleeting pangs of conscience. They were too far gone to turn back now. The path was set, and the only question that remained was when and how they would push Sophia Ashford into a life-threatening accident that would destroy her unborn child and, in their minds, secure their future fortunes. While the conspirators laid their trap, life in the Ashford household carried on with deceptive normalcy. Jonathan continued managing his multinational deals, traveling intermittently. Sophia busied herself with an interior renovation of the penthouse nursery, determined to create a tranquil space for her baby. She oversaw the installation of pastel murals and hand-carved wooden furniture, occasionally leaning on Jonathan's assistant or her friend Annika for help. Between phone calls and design sketches, Sophia felt an undercurrent of tension creeping ever closer. Her instincts told her something wasn't quite right. Every so often, she caught Victoria watching her with an unreadable expression, and though she tried not to dwell on it, memories of seeing or sensing Cassandra Moore's presence at the dinner lingered. She tried to bring up Cassandra's name to Jonathan, but he dismissed it as an old contact or a minor confusion. There was no real reassurance in his words. Jonathan, for his part, was torn. He knew Cassandra was pushing boundaries, and he feared that if Sophia ever learned the truth of their affair, it would devastate her, especially in her delicate condition. Torn by guilt, he contemplated ways to extricate himself from Cassandra's grip permanently. He even considered telling Sophia everything, risking her wrath in exchange for total honesty. But each time he gathered the courage, the weight of potential fallout made him hesitate. He didn't want to add stress to Sophia's pregnancy, nor did he want a media scandal that could shake the Ashford empire. During one of Victoria's visits to the penthouse, she casually mentioned the idea of a weekend family retreat at the Ashford estate in upstate New York. "It's been ages since we all visited," she said, sipping tea. "The fresh air, the gardens, it'd be perfect for Sophia to relax." She glanced at her sister-in-law with what she hoped passed as genuine warmth. "You need a break from city life, dear. And once the baby arrives, traveling will be more complicated." Sophia considered the offer. Part of her was reluctant to go anywhere. She felt safer in her own home, surrounded by staff she trusted. But the suggestion of nature and solitude was tempting. She was, after all, a bit overwhelmed by the incessant pace of Manhattan. Maybe the quiet estate could indeed help her distress. "That sounds lovely," she replied. "Let's plan for next weekend, if Jonathan can get away from his meetings." Victoria smiled, triumphant. She texted Cassandra immediately after, letting her know they had an upcoming opportunity. Everything aligned. Jonathan would likely spend parts of the weekend immersed in remote work calls, leaving Sophia alone in the estate's labyrinth of hallways and precarious staircases. Cassandra, for her part, had a cunning plan to ensure she'd be nearby without arousing suspicion. As the weekend approached, tension thickened. Sophia found herself brushing off persistent nightmares, hazy images of tumbling headlong down a flight of stairs, her outstretched hands desperately trying to protect her unborn child. She chalked it up to anxiety, never imagining that her nightmares could soon become reality. The Ashford estate in upstate New York was a majestic property framed by centuries-old oak trees and rolling lawns. The main mansion, constructed in the late 19th century, boasted Victorian architectural flourishes, from sweeping turrets to elaborate stained glass windows. The centerpiece of the interior was the grand staircase, a wide, curved marvel of mahogany and marble, spanning 2 stories. It had been the site of countless family photographs, winter holiday gatherings, and formal events. Yet in the eyes of Victoria and Cassandra, it was a lethal opportunity waiting to unfold. Sophia and Jonathan arrived on a crisp Friday afternoon. The estate staff, housekeepers, a groundskeeper, and a private chef welcomed them with warm smiles. Sophia inhaled the fresh country air, feeling a flutter of relief. Maybe the getaway would indeed be revitalizing. She wandered through the gardens, gently cradling her small baby bump. Jonathan spent the remainder of the day in the estate's old-fashioned study, dialing into conference calls. Sophia, feeling fatigued, decided to rest in a sunlit sitting room on the first floor. She dozed off in a plush armchair, lulled by the distant hum of nature. Victoria arrived early Saturday morning, stepping out of a sleek black sedan. She embraced her brother, exchanging pleasantries about the estate's upkeep. Then she turned to Sophia, feigning excitement. "You look radiant," she said, forcing a bright smile. "How's the baby?" "Everything seems healthy," Sophia replied, politely returning the smile. "The doctors say I'm progressing well." Victoria nodded, maintaining an air of sisterly concern. "That's wonderful. You should enjoy this place, really get some rest." Her mind buzzed with the knowledge that Cassandra was en route. Under the pretext of a work engagement, Cassandra Moore slipped into a hotel room in the nearest town. Her official reason for being in the area? She claimed to be planning an upcoming charity event for a nearby historical society. In reality, she was just minutes away from the Ashford estate, waiting for Victoria's signal. Late that afternoon, Jonathan was called away for an urgent video conference that demanded strong Wi-Fi, which was spotty at the mansion. He had to drive into town to find a reliable connection at a local business centre. This left Sophia and Victoria alone at the estate, with minimal staff around. The housekeeping team had been given the evening off once dinner was served. Only a lone groundskeeper and the private chef remained on duty. Victoria seized her chance. She sent a discreet text to Cassandra. "Jonathan's gone." "Perfect timing," Cassandra replied swiftly. "On my way." Within the hour, Cassandra arrived, slipping through the old servant's entrance at the back of the mansion. Victoria greeted her with a conspiratorial nod. Tension crackled in the air as they quietly ascended a back staircase, strategizing in hushed voices. Sophia, meanwhile, was in the second-floor gallery corridor, admiring ancestral portraits of the Ashford lineage. She moved slowly, mindful of her center of gravity with the pregnancy. A slight headache nagged her, so she decided to return to her bedroom for some rest. That meant navigating the grand staircase. What she didn't realize was that Victoria and Cassandra were already positioning themselves. Their plan was a simple, brutal push, enough force to send Sophia plunging. The illusions of an accidental slip would be easy enough to maintain if no one else was present to witness it. Fear might cause Sophia to lose her footing. A tumble from that height could be catastrophic, especially for a pregnant woman. The mansion felt eerily quiet. Dimly lit sconces lined the hallway. Outside, twilight settled over the grounds, casting long shadows through the stained glass windows. With each step Sophia took toward the top of the stairs, the conspirators' adrenaline spiked. It was as if the entire estate held its breath, teetering on the brink of a nightmarish climax. At the top of the grand staircase, Sophia paused. A wave of dizziness washed over her, perhaps from standing too quickly or from her earlier headache. She placed a hand gently on the ornate banister for support, breathing steadily to steady herself. The hush of the mansion enveloped her, broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock in the main foyer below. Suddenly, a whisper of movement behind her. She turned, startled to see Victoria standing a few feet away, her expression strangely intense. Before Sophia could speak, she sensed another presence, someone stepping out from the corridor's shadows. Cassandra Moore. Recognition flickered in Sophia's eyes, and alarm set in. "Cassandra? What are you?" she began, heart pounding, but Cassandra offered no explanation. Her face was contorted with desperate resolve. In that fraction of a second, Sophia understood that the two women were not there by chance. A spike of terror coursed through her as she realized that Jonathan's mistress and his own sister had cornered her at the top of a steep staircase. Fear constricted her throat, and she instinctively took a step backward, edging closer to the banister. Her mind scrambled for a logical reason they would appear together like this, and found none. "Victoria, what's going on?" she managed, her voice trembling. Victoria's eyes gleamed with malice and a twisted sense of justification. "I'm sorry, Sophia," she whispered, though her tone lacked any genuine remorse. "It has to be done." Before Sophia could shout for help, the pair lunged. Victoria grabbed her arm, while Cassandra pressed her full weight against Sophia's midsection, twisting in a motion that sent Sophia reeling. Sophia tried to fight back, but her center of gravity was already off balance. She clutched at the banister, her nails scraping wood, but the momentum was too great. Her grip slipped. Time seemed to slow as she tumbled backward. The carved steps rushed up to meet her, and she felt a sickening jolt of pain ricochet through her body. With each bounce, she tried to shield her abdomen, but the force of the fall was overwhelming. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was a fleeting glimpse of Victoria and Cassandra leaning over the banister, their faces a mask of horror or perhaps triumph. Down she went, landing crumpled and motionless at the base of the grand staircase. A pool of blood began to seep across the marble floor, horrifyingly bright against the pale stone, as the entire world seemed to hold its breath. The hush of the old mansion was shattered by a single scream, whether from Sophia or one of the conspirators. No one could be sure. Panic erupted. The private chef, hearing a thud and a scream, rushed from the kitchen to find Sophia's shattered form at the foot of the stairs. He let out a cry of alarm, kneeling beside her, afraid to move her for fear of causing further injury. Blood trickled from a gash on her forehead, and her breathing was ragged, shallow. Victoria and Cassandra stood at the top of the staircase, momentarily paralyzed by what they had done. Victoria's heart hammered in her chest, and she felt sick to her stomach. In the wake of the actual violence, the abstract plan suddenly became horrifyingly real. "God," she whispered, face pale. "We have to," Cassandra, spurred by survival instinct, grabbed Victoria's arm. "We have to get down there. Act like we're trying to help. If anyone suspects us, we're finished." Clattering down the steps, they feigned shock, rushing to Sophia's side. Cassandra put on a convincing performance, shouting at the chef, "Call an ambulance! Now!" Victoria knelt, forcing her expression into one of frantic concern. She touched Sophia's wrist, feeling for a pulse. It was there, but faint. Sophia's eyelids fluttered slightly, as if she fought to stay conscious. Minutes later, sirens wailed in the distance, echoing through the estate's sprawling grounds. Paramedics burst into the foyer, guided by the trembling chef. They carefully placed Sophia on a stretcher, administering emergency care. "We need to transport her immediately," announced one medic. "She's in shock, and the baby is at risk." Victoria hovered, wringing her hands. Cassandra lingered by the stairs, trying to remain inconspicuous. Another paramedic asked, "What happened here? Did she trip?" "Why, yes," Victoria stammered, tears brimming in her eyes. "I was in the next room. I heard her scream. I ran to find her. She must have missed a step." The paramedic nodded grimly. "We'll do what we can." In the swirl of chaos, no one noticed Cassandra quietly slip away from the scene. She made her exit through the servant's door, as planned. Her vehicle was still parked discreetly on a side road. Before driving off, she sent one terse text to Victoria, "Let me know what happens. Remember, accident." Meanwhile, Jonathan, still in town for his video conference, was alerted by the frantic calls from the estate. He raced back with dread coiling in his gut. By the time he arrived, the ambulance was already pulling away, sirens blazing. In a mixture of panic and rage, Jonathan demanded, "What on earth happened?" Victoria, tears streaking her cheeks, stammered through her rehearsed story. "She must have fallen, Jonathan. I heard a scream. It was terrible. She's badly hurt." Grief overcame him. He barely registered Victoria's presence as he climbed back into his car, determined to follow the ambulance to the local hospital. The entire drive, his mind churned with questions. Why had Sophia been on the stairs alone? How could such a horrifying accident occur in a place he thought was safe? Inside the mansion's foyer, the blood on the marble floor told a grim story. And in the chaos, one small detail went unnoticed, a single scuff mark on the top banister, where Sophia had tried to cling on for dear life. Perhaps one day, that mark would reveal the truth, that she hadn't merely tripped or missed a step. She had been pushed. Sophia arrived at the local hospital in critical condition. Doctors and nurses sprinted alongside her gurney, rushing her into an emergency operating room. The immediate concern was her head trauma and the extent of internal injuries that might threaten her life and the life of her unborn child. A top obstetric surgeon was called in to assess the fetus. Jonathan paced the waiting area, eyes red from worry. He left hurried voicemails with medical specialists in New York City, desperate to fly them in if necessary. Everything moved in a blur of white coats, beeping monitors, and sterile hallways. The smell of antiseptic filled his nostrils, and the fluorescent lights overhead buzzed oppressively. Victoria arrived shortly after, feigning supportive concern. She placed a hand on Jonathan's shoulder, hoping to appear the devoted sister. "Any news?" she asked quietly. He shook his head, exhaling shakily. "They're still operating. Her condition is dire." His voice broke. "I can't lose her, Victoria. And the baby god, we've wanted this for so long." A pang of guilt twisted in Victoria's stomach. For a moment, she felt the enormity of what she'd done. Her older brother, the man she grew up admiring in many ways, was on the verge of losing the woman he loved. The baby they both cherished might never draw breath. The tears that welled in Victoria's eyes were no longer just for show, but greed and fear quickly smothered her guilt. If she displayed too much remorse or contradictory emotions, Jonathan might suspect something. With a forced sob, Victoria wrapped her arms around him. "We have to hope for the best," she managed, adopting the role of a distraught sibling. Hours crawled by. At last, a surgeon emerged, peeling off a blood-stained gown. "Mr. Ashford?" Jonathan rushed forward. "Your wife is stable for now, but she sustained serious trauma. We had to perform an emergency procedure to stop internal bleeding. As for the baby," he paused, carefully choosing his words, "the baby's heart rate is faint. We're monitoring closely, but there's a risk of miscarriage or complications. It's too early to tell." Jonathan's body trembled with anguished relief. Sophia was alive for the moment. The child was at risk, but still there, still fighting. He wanted to see her. The surgeon gently explained that Sophia was in critical care and only immediate family could enter briefly. Victoria offered to wait outside, citing her own shaken nerves. Jonathan nodded, stepping into the dimly lit ICU room. There, Sophia lay unconscious, an oxygen tube in her nose, the fourth line snaking across her arms. Her head was wrapped in bandages, and bruises mottled her arms and shoulders. Jonathan's heart clenched. He approached her bedside, gently brushing hair from her forehead. "I'm here, my love," he whispered, voice breaking. Outside, Victoria slipped into a corner to text Cassandra. "She's alive. So is the baby. For now." Cassandra's reply came quickly. "We need to be careful. If she wakes up, she might remember everything." Victoria's chest tightened. She typed back, "Pray she doesn't." That night, Jonathan refused to leave the hospital, pulling a chair beside Sophia's bed. As the monitors beeped steadily, he thought back to every time he might have let Sophia down his secrets, his half-truths. Should she survive, he vowed silently to atone for them all. Little did he know that the greatest betrayal was not his alone, but that of two women plotting to finish what they started. News of Sophia's accident rippled through the Ashford business empire and New York's elite social circles. Many expressed shock and sent well wishes. A few gossiped that perhaps Sophia was overexerting herself, letting vanity over her figure cause a misstep. But as the days passed, a darker rumor began to flicker among those who knew the Ashford family, questions about whether it had truly been an accident. One of the estate's junior staff whispered to a friend that he'd heard two female voices just before the crash, though he couldn't identify them. Jonathan was too consumed by Sophia's precarious condition to chase rumors. The doctors managed to stabilize her further, but she remained comatose. Her baby's heartbeat, tenuous yet persistent, provided a glimmer of hope. The head obstetrician, Dr. Marianne Liu, explained, "We've done everything we can medically. Now it's a waiting game." During this vigil, Jonathan received a phone call from Matthias Carlson, the trusted security consultant who'd investigated the penthouse footage weeks earlier. "Mr. Ashford, I'm sorry to disturb you, but I thought you should know I did some follow-up checks on Miss Cassandra Moore's whereabouts." Jonathan bristled. "I told you we should let that go." Matthias's voice was firm. "I understand, sir, but with Miss S. Ashford's recent accident, I was prompted to look deeper. Miss Moore was staying at a hotel just 20 minutes from the estate on the night of the incident. She checked out the next morning. A cold wave washed over Jonathan. "That doesn't prove anything," he said quietly, but doubt churned in his mind. "Maybe not," Matthias conceded, "but it seems more than coincidence. Be careful, sir." Jonathan ended the call, his thoughts swirling. Cassandra's presence near the estate the night of Sophia's fall was too disturbing to ignore. Why would she be there, of all places? A creeping suspicion gnawed at him. Could Cassandra have had something to do with the accident? Simultaneously, Victoria found herself grappling with internal panic. She visited the hospital daily under the guise of concern, always checking to see if Sophia had shown any sign of waking, any chance she might identify her attackers. Each day that Sophia remained comatose was a twisted blessing for Victoria, who dreaded what revelations might come if Sophia regained consciousness. Cassandra, meanwhile, made herself scarce. She called Victoria sporadically, urging caution. "We need to prepare for every possibility. If she wakes up, we're done. We might need alternative measures." Victoria balked. "You mean sabotage her recovery? She's in the hospital, under round-the-clock care." "How could we possibly?" Cassandra exhaled. "I'm just saying, if something arises, we can't hesitate. We're already deep in this." That night, Victoria stared at her reflection in a vanity mirror. The guilt and fear carved lines of stress on her once smooth features. Yet, her ambition, her hunger for a bigger piece of the Ashford legacy, pushed her forward. She clung to the faint hope that Sophia might remain forever silent, never naming her attackers. But the Ashford world was closing in with quiet suspicion. Jonathan's gut told him something was off about Cassandra's proximity to the estate. And the staff rumors, though hushed, hinted that there were more pieces to this puzzle than a mere tragic tumble. Like dominoes set in a precarious formation, it would only take one nudge, the faintest recollection by Sophia, to bring everything crashing down. On a humid afternoon, nearly 2 weeks after her fall, Sophia's eyes fluttered open. Dazed and in pain, she groaned softly. Jonathan, who had been dozing in a hospital chair, sprang up and pressed the call button for the nurse. "Sophia?" "Oh, thank God," he whispered, stroking her hand. "You're in the hospital. You had an accident, but you're alive. And the baby—" His voice caught in his throat. The baby's still with us." Tears slipped down Sophia's cheeks, though she lacked the strength to speak. Her body felt like lead, every joint throbbing with bruises. She gazed at Jonathan, her eyes brimming with relief and fear. Gradually, bits of memory surfaced standing at the top of the estate staircase, hearing something behind her. She tried to focus, but everything was a blur. Over the next few days, hospital staff monitored her closely. Dr. Liu noted that the baby seemed stable, but any undue stress could be dangerous. "Take it slow," she advised. The slightest complication might put both mother and child at risk. Jonathan remained by Sophia's side, reading to her, speaking in soothing tones, urging her to remember only when she felt ready. He wanted the truth about the accident, but not at the expense of her health. Yet beneath his gentle encouragement lay a simmering need to confirm or dispel his suspicions about Cassandra's possible involvement. Victoria visited the hospital daily, her false concern unwavering. She brought flowers and gourmet soups, hugging Sophia gently, feigning tears of joy at her recovery. Each day, Sophia said little, answering questions in monosyllables. A subtle tension pulsed in the room whenever Victoria arrived, though Jonathan chalked it up to the trauma of the fall. It never occurred to him that his sister might be the reason behind Sophia's haunted expression. Finally, one late evening after Jonathan had stepped out to make a phone call, Sophia found the strength to speak more candidly with her doctor. "Why, remember something," she whispered, voice raspy. "I wasn't alone at the top of the stairs." Dr. Liu glanced at her carefully. "You recall who was there?" Sophia closed her eyes, her heartbeat quickening on the monitor. A flicker of a face, Victoria's. Another face, Cassandra's. The recollection of them lunging at her was still foggy, but she was certain she hadn't simply fallen. Her breath accelerated. She placed a protective hand over her abdomen. "They pushed me." Dr. Liu's expression turned serious. "Who? Did you see them clearly?" Before Sophia could respond, a wave of nausea rolled over her. She heaved a breath, wincing at the pain in her bruised ribs. Fear coursed through her, knowing the gravity of her claim. If she named Victoria and Cassandra, the resulting whirlwind could tear the Ashford family apart. Her instincts told her she needed evidence proof before she spoke such a damning accusation aloud. "Doctor." Liu, sensing the fragility of the moment, gently laid a hand on Sophia's arm. "You don't need to rush this. Take your time, focus on your recovery. If you remember clearly, we'll help you do what's necessary." Sophia nodded, tears in her eyes. She cradled her bump, silently vowing that she would protect her child at all costs. Victoria might act innocent at her bedside, but if her memory was correct, that same woman had nearly killed her and her baby. Cassandra's involvement further complicated matters. Sophia barely knew her, but recognized her as Jonathan's acquaintance. Why would she want to harm her? For the sake of her child, Sophia decided she would unravel the truth, step by step, quietly collecting information. She couldn't rely solely on Jonathan's help, not when his own sister and possibly his mistress were involved. A survival instinct kicked in. She would have to be smart, cautious, and brave. The memory was awakened, and soon the truth would follow. Word eventually reached Jonathan that Sophia remembered something. He pressed her for details, but she remained guarded, insisting she needed clarity before speaking too soon. Part of her feared that if she named Victoria outright, Jonathan might confront his sister prematurely, giving Victoria and Cassandra time to cover their tracks or try to finish what they started. Determined to protect Sophia, Jonathan quietly hired a private investigator, Nick Guerrero, someone with a reputation for unearthing hidden truths in high-profile circles. Nick took statements from the estate staff, pieced together timelines, and scoured phone records for any sign of unusual calls or texts around the time of Sophia's accident. He discovered that Victoria's phone had been in constant contact with an unknown number registered in Cassandra Moore's name, both before and after the incident. When Nick brought this information to Jonathan, he looked pale and drawn. "Your sister and Miss Moore appear to have been in frequent contact," Nick said gently. "They were also geographically near the estate at the time of the fall. We can't conclude guilt from this alone, but it's suspicious." Jonathan bowed his head, anguish flickering in his eyes. "I can't believe this. Victoria, my own sister? Cassandra, maybe. I know she has her issues. But Victoria, it's monstrous." Nick placed a reassuring hand on Jonathan's shoulder. "I'll dig deeper. If they had a plan, there might be texts or emails revealing more, but if they're careful, they might have covered their tracks. We need a confession or direct evidence." Meanwhile, at the hospital, Sophia grew stronger each day. She gained enough stamina to walk short distances. Cautious of her fragile condition, the medical staff allowed her to move with assistance. On one of these slow walks down the corridor, she confided in Jonathan about her partial recollection. "I saw two figures. It wasn't an accident." She looked at him, tears in her eyes. "Your sister was there." A storm of emotions crossed Jonathan's face: disbelief, horror, rage. His breath caught. "Victoria?" He clenched his fists. "What did she do?" Sophia inhaled, shaky. "I believe she pushed me, along with Cassandra Moore." Her words sent Jonathan reeling. The possibility that his sister and his mistress had joined forces to kill his pregnant wife was beyond comprehension. Yet the puzzle pieces were all lining up. Jonathan remembered Cassandra's presence near the estate, the suspicious texts, and Victoria's odd behavior. It was horrifying but possible. That evening, Jonathan confronted Victoria in the hospital hallway. She had just stepped off the elevator with a bouquet of flowers. Before she could react, Jonathan grabbed her arm, fury blazing in his eyes. "Sophia remembers everything," he hissed. "She says you were there. You pushed her." Victoria's face went ashen, but she quickly composed herself. "What? She must be confused or hallucinating. You know what trauma does to people." He glared, voice low and dangerous. "You listen to me. If I find proof you had anything to do with this, I'll see you rot in prison for the rest of your life." He released her arm with a shove, storming back towards Sophia's room. Victoria's world tilted on its axis. Sophia's memory threatened to unravel her entire scheme. In a desperate move, she texted Cassandra. She remembers. "Jonathan suspects. We're in trouble." Cassandra's reply was swift and ice-cold. "We must act quickly. If they're gathering evidence, we could face charges. Or worse. Let me handle it." That message left Victoria trembling. Cassandra, handling it, could mean any number of terrible possibilities, up to and including a second attempt on Sophia's life. The tension now reached a boiling point, with each side gearing up for a final confrontation that would decide whether Sophia and her unborn child survived, and whether the Ashford family's dark secret would be exposed to the world. Below is the merged chapter 14, combining the original chapters 14 and 15 into one continuous chapter. The rest of the story, chapters 1-13, remains unchanged. Below is a shorter merged chapter 14, combining the original chapters 14 and 15 in a more concise form. Late one night, with Sophia recovering in the hospital, Cassandra Moore slipped inside wearing a forged nurse's ID. She intended to silence Sophia for good. Approaching the bed with a syringe, she hissed, "You're going to destroy everything." Terrified, Sophia pressed the emergency call button. At that moment, Jonathan, along with private investigator Nick Guerrero and 2 security guards, burst in. One guard pinned Cassandra to the floor, her syringe clattering away. Ranting in desperation, Cassandra blurted, "We planned it, Victoria and I. It was all for Jonathan and the Ashford fortune." Her outburst drew the attention of real hospital staff and police, who arrested her on the spot. Under interrogation, Cassandra implicated Victoria Ashford as her co-conspirator. That same night, police apprehended Victoria at her apartment. She denied the charges, but incriminating phone records and text messages confirmed her role in the scheme. Relieved yet shaken, Sophia clung to Jonathan, her unborn child, still miraculously safe. Though stunned that his own sister could commit such a crime, Jonathan cooperated fully with authorities. During the high-profile trial, Sophia described being pushed down the stairs, while text records showed Victoria and Cassandra plotting to eliminate her. Found guilty of attempted murder and conspiracy, both women received lengthy prison sentences. Despite the media storm, public sympathy surrounded Sophia and her baby. Jonathan faced his own guilt for allowing Cassandra into their lives, but vowed to rebuild his marriage on honesty. Gradually, Sophia healed physically and emotionally. Her pregnancy continued without further complications, and months later, she gave birth to a healthy baby girl named Aurora, symbolizing a radiant new beginning. The Ashford name remained linked to scandal, yet Jonathan and Sophia focused on their daughter and each other, forging a stronger bond through their shared ordeal. Though their past was haunted by greed and betrayal, they chose to embrace the hope of a new dawn, grateful that love and courage had ultimately prevailed. Betrayal, greed, and redemption weave together in this harrowing tale, proving that no fortune is worth the price of an innocent life. When Victoria Ashford and Cassandra Moore conspired to eliminate the pregnant Sophia Ashford, they underestimated both the resilience of a mother's love and the lengths a family would go to protect one of their own. Though the Ashford name was rattled by scandal, Jonathan and Sophia stood firm, rebuilding their lives on a foundation of truth and renewed devotion. In the end, the birth of Aurora brought hope and healing, a radiant dawn after the darkest night. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster journey of power, passion, and payback. If you found yourself hooked by this dramatic saga, please like this video, share it with others who appreciate a gripping story, and subscribe to our channel for more tales that delve into the hidden corners of human ambition. Your support drives us to keep telling stories that captivate the mind and stir the heart. Until next time.